tonight. I don't know that I can communicate to you what I've received out of it, but Naomi, it doesn't say here, if you'll notice in verse 1, it doesn't say that Naomi remembered or Naomi suggested. It only says it's a intro verse. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's. That word "and" is an important word. Because you come through verse. Now remember, these are not written in the original. They're not written in chapter and verse formation. Okay? It's written in continuation of thought. I appreciate what the translators did in giving us chapters and verses. Because it's a whole lot easier for me to say, turn to Ruth chapter 2, verse 1, than to say, okay, go over to Ruth and read down there until you get to the verse, and Naomi had a kinsman. It's a lot easier to do it the way we have it than the other way. But the word, you have verse 22 of chapter 1. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. Okay? That's chapter 1. They came in the beginning of barley harvest. And that's a good ending to a chapter. Then you come chapter 2. And. Now, I was reading where I can't remember what we were doing Sunday night. I know where we were with David, but I don't remember what verse it was, and it said "but," and I would have put "and," but here I like the word and not "but," because "but" is kind of we're changing things. This was happening, but this is happening. Well, she's here at the beginning of barley harvest. What now? And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. There is a Redeemer. Number one, the Redeemer's presence. Boaz is the kinsman redeemer. He is the one who we see in this book is the Redeemer. A mighty man of wealth, it says. Elimelech may have had a similar standing, possibly a similar standing. I don't know that he was a mighty man of wealth, but he probably had something. It was probably of a well-to-do family in those days. But Naomi has been gone and she's back. And we see the Redeemer's presence. Letter A, when the famine was greater than Elimelech's faith, he, the Redeemer, was in Bethlehem. The Redeemer never moved. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But he was there. And when things got tough and Elimelech said, oh no, what are we going to do? I can't make it anymore. Instead of going to the nearer kinsman who did make it work, who had it, instead of going to the one who could help, he says, I'm leaving. I'm going to where? Moab. The wicked country. I think you preach 3 times a week. Can't remember what you said when. I can't remember if I said this last week or not, but I think I did. When Peter thought there's no hope, the Lord's not going to do anything else, what did he do? He went fishing. He went to the life he knew before he met Jesus. He went back to where he was. Now, I know that Elimelech wasn't from Moab, but why is it whenever we, I guess it's just we're weak. We're just weak. Whenever we as Christians lose a little faith, when God doesn't act when we want Him to, when things seem a little rougher than we thought they would be, where do we go? Back to the world. Back to the place where the wicked are. And that's what Elimelech did. Things got tough. Yeah, there was famine in the land. Why? Because the children of Israel had been disobedient. They had disobeyed God, and so God sent famine in the land. So what does Elimelech do? Well, you know what? I'm going to go to... God's not doing what He's supposed to do, what He said He would do. He said He would take care of us. He said He would do this, said He would do this. So I'm going to the wicked place. The Redeemer was still in Bethlehem. Let her be when Naomi's sweetness. You remember that's what Naomi means. God is sweet, or the sweetness of God. When Naomi's sweetness had turned to sorrow, where was the Redeemer? He was in Bethlehem. Whenever she lost her husband, when she lost her sons and was going through that, he was still in Bethlehem. Let her see when Naomi could only see a glimmer of hope, he was in Bethlehem. She hears, while in Moab, husband's dead, sons are dead, and she hears, hey, the Lord's blessed Israel again. There's bread in the house of the Lord again. And she says, well, I guess I'm going to go back home then. It does not appear that Naomi was excited. Oh, I'm going back. I'm going to go back to my people. Oh, God's doing something great. I'm going to go back to where God's blessing. It doesn't seem like it was any of that. Because if it had been that way, she probably would have said to her girls, her daughters-in-law, yes, come with me. She only saw a glimmer of hope. Letter D, the redeeming kinsman had never left. He remained right where he'd always been. And I give those points to bring it to us. When our fear is greater than our faith, when famine comes, or pandemic, or financial difficulty, or whatever it comes, and the forces are pounding on us, whatever they may be, whether they are satanic or whether they're just the world, the flesh, are pounding down on us, oftentimes our fear is greater than our faith, and we run back to where's the Redeemer? Where's our Redeemer? He stays right there. He stays right in the same place. He is immutable, unchangeable. Nothing moves him. Whenever Naomi's sweetness had turned to sorrow, when our sweetness turns to sorrow, where's the Redeemer? Right where he always was. Right where he always was. And in those moments, whenever our sweetness has turned to sorrow and things are rough, and then we just see a little bit of hope. Not enough to get excited. Not enough to say, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me. Praise His name. But we just say, well, you know what? I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to... I heard that there's bread in the house of the Lord, and so I'm just going to go back and see what happens, you know. So just a little bit of hope. Where's the Redeemer? Oh, the Redeemer never left. The Redeemer never moved. He remained and remains right where He had always been. And so often we as Christians say, well, I just don't feel like God is close to me anymore. Be careful about what you feel. Feeling is dangerous. But if we have the thought that God is not as close to me as He was, well, guess what? The Redeemer's still in Bethlehem. The Redeemer's still on the throne. The Redeemer has never moved. If we're not as close to God, and I know this is an old adage that has been said over and over, but if you're not as close to God as you used to be, guess who moved? Because He doesn't move. He's unchangeable. He is more true than true north. He is unchangeable. That's His presence. Number 2, the Redeemer's power. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's. Now, let me go back for just a moment. Think about Naomi in Moab. She's lost her husband. She's lost her boys. Naomi was, I guess at that time, unaware. Maybe her sorrow had blinded her or closed off her thought process, muted her thought process, if you will. But if she had been mindful of the Redeemer, she'd have headed right back home. He never changed. Whether she knew he was there or not, he was always where he was supposed to be, right there. The Redeemer's power, okay? It says Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth. It says that he was a mighty man. You know, when we watch videos, movies, or whatever of Bible times, and I'm not talking about just the world. I've seen Christian productions. We always portray, men are almost always portrayed, men who are the good guys in Christian movies, as kind of soft. You know? Have you ever seen most movies about Jesus? He's kind of a wimp. Very feminine looking. I don't know where I saw it, but I saw a movie with Boaz. And Boaz was just kind of a gentle looking fellow. He's a gentle man. He is. But it says that he was a mighty man. I know it says mighty man of wealth, but those are two different words, and we'll talk about that. But he's a mighty man. The Hebrew word is gibor. And the word can be rendered warrior. Now, what time is this? What time of history does this story take place? Do what? During the Judges, the time of the Judges. What took place every so often during that time? They fought. They fought. They fell into sin, they were captured, and then they fought. And they warred. And he had been, the Bible says he was a mighty man. The writer, probably Samuel writing this, says he was a mighty man. He was a warrior. He had been valiant in battle. Boaz had undoubtedly, letter D, been in battle. He was, if he'd have been alive during David's time, he'd have been one of David's mighty men. He would have fought beside David. He would have been one of the guys that David said, yeah, you go with me. You're going to be my bodyguard, one of my 30 men. He would have been a mighty man. He was powerful. He was powerful. And I'll give you the last one and I'll come back. It was given in this time that a man of means would command men in battle. That's just who you would look to. You know, in today's world, men of means, men of financial means, aren't usually the ones people are calling on to go into battle. But in this day, that's who led men. That's who the leaders were people who had money and influence, and people looked to them. It was just natural that they would be the ones to lead in battle. Abraham actually had his servants. He led to fight. And so it was natural in that time that a man who had enough money to have servants in the field would lead people in battle. Now look, we can go to war on our own, and I'm not talking about physical war. I'm not talking about going out here and blasting people on Facebook and defending your candidate, whoever it is. It's ridiculous, some of the stuff that happens. But you can war in your own life on your own, or you can turn to the Redeemer. Now, Boaz was a mighty man, but he wasn't omnipotent. Our Redeemer's omnipotent. who is on the Lord's side? Who's going to fight on His side? Who's going to fight with Him? And He said, if we'll let Him, He'll fight the battles for us. Number 3, the Redeemer's position. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth. Now, there's no doubt that Boaz was a wealthy man. He had money. There's no doubt about that. But the words here, the words Gibor, and this word, the Hebrew word, is Kail. Now we would say Chayil. That's how we would pronounce that word. But it's Kail. And it is the word for wealth. But the word is not restricted. Let's look at number 1 under there. The word is not restricted to financial means. Because when we talk about wealth, what do we say? Oh, they got lots of money. That person's wealthy. They've got lots of money. But the word is not restricted to finances. The word lends itself to being associated with someone who is rich in anything. So when we look at the Redeemer here, what do we see about Boaz, the Redeemer? Yeah, letter A, Boaz had money. He had money. Letter B, Boaz had land. We know that. Where does she go? We read down here in verses 2 and 3. Well, verse 3 actually. She went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and her hap was to light on part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. Well, if he's got enough to have reapers and then she gleaned after them, he has enough land and product that he can leave some, and that's what they would do in that day. In that day, if you had land and once you harvested your field, you would leave some on the outskirts of the field for those who didn't have enough to come by and get some of what your field had to offer. And so he's a wealthy man. He's got money. He's got land. Boaz has social standing. When you come over to chapter 4, and Boaz went in front of the city council, basically. I don't think he went there as a low man coming and saying, hey, I want to plead with you guys or talk to you guys. I think he was part of it. I believe he was part of the group. I believe that Boaz was somebody that everybody wanted to know. Not just because of his money and land, but he was socially active. He was one of the elders of the city, although I don't think he was an old man. He was one of the elders. People respected him. And I think it is because of letter D. Boaz had, most importantly, godliness. Boaz was a man to know. He had money. Yeah, he had money. And I know. People are drawn to people with money. We know that. People want to be close to somebody with money. It's amazing. I look back, not in my day, I look back on videos, pictures, whenever the Beatles were popular, and how girls would react to the Beatles coming by and just, I guess it would be similar to, speaking to the younger people, how Justin Bieber was a few years ago. And there are others, I guess, that takes place. But, he touched my hand, and just, somebody famous, he's got money, he's got fame, he's got wealth, he's got all these things, social standing, which is probably the biggest thing now with social media and YouTube and Instagram and all those things. Social standing is probably bigger than if they've got money, although they kind of come together anymore. But I think people, yeah, they were drawn to Boaz for those things because everybody kind of wants to be near those people. But I think the thing that was different about Boaz, definitely different than Elimelech, Boaz stayed. Boaz planted year after year after year. Whenever there was no crop yielding, he still stayed. And he planted. He was obedient. And we will see down through here how Boaz interacts with Ruth, how he interacts with Naomi, how he interacts with the town. He was a godly man, a man of kindness, a man of love. Yeah, he was a mighty man, yes, but he was a mighty man of wealth. And when you put those two words together, the idea is that he was a good man. He was mighty in his goodness. I think that was... I know that God includes wealth in the writings to let us know how people stand and what they're like and everything. But I really believe that when we read this verse, a mighty man of wealth, that we see a man who is strong in God. I really believe that. When you look at the rest of the story, and we'll get to it, and y'all have probably read it before, but when we look at this story, you're going to see a mighty man of God. Not just a mighty man of wealth. He was a godly man. And that, to me, is what separated Boaz from every other man, I think, in the town at this time. Is that he loved God. He was kind. He was gentle. He was considerate. He was loving. When he goes, even in his going to the nearer kinsman in front of the council, and he goes with a plan, but he doesn't go with deceit. He goes and says, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but he goes and says, hey, Elimelech's family's back. You know, Elimelech, his family needs to be redeemed. Everything needs to be redeemed back. He's got the land, this, that. He says, oh, yeah. And the Moabitess, Ruth, he says, oh, no, I can't do that. He doesn't go and speak ill. He doesn't do anything like that. He just deals right with him. I know it was short tonight. It's just one verse. One verse. But I want you to see the Redeemer. And our Redeemer's position. God doesn't care about social standing. He's not worried about his social standing. We are generally more worried about God's social standing than God is. You know what I mean? If somebody badmouths God, let me tell you something. God doesn't care. Jesus, they called him all kinds of names on the cross, and he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. He's not really worried about the social standing. But my Father is rich in houses and lands. He holdeth the wealth of the world in his hand. But he's not just rich in houses and lands. My God is rich in mercy. My God is rich in grace. My God is rich in love. My God is rich in forgiveness. Whew. Our Redeemer's position is greater than the Redeemer's position in the book, than Boaz as the Redeemer's position. Yet, we act like Naomi. Well, I was Sweetness, you know. My name was Sweetness, but don't call me Naomi anymore because the sweetness is gone. Call me Mara. Bitter, sorrow. I just had a thought. That's dangerous. I think I'm going to start calling bitter Christians Mara. Get a conversation started, you know. Somebody comes in, how you doing? Well, you know, she's one. Oh, I'm sorry, you're Mara. What? Bitter. You're bitter, aren't you? Sorrowful. The sweetness of God is gone. Okay, I'll get off that, I guess. But when our sweetness turns to sorrow, our Redeemer's still there. He hadn't left. He's still strong. He's still powerful, kind, loving. I was talking to You'll know this. She knows this story. But Danny Winklepleck today, kid that was in my youth group down in Florida. He's went to college, be a youth pastor, got to his first church, and it was just, sadly, as it can be in ministry, rough. It was a hard situation. And he ended up being let go and, just thought he was done in ministry. Just got, no, I don't want to say bitter, but, he's burned. He got burned. It's hard to go back to something when you get burned. And big old tall Texan was here a couple of years ago. Richard Wallace was here, a friend of my dad's. I don't know if y'all remember him being here. But Danny lives in Dallas. And he came to hear my dad preach back in the beginning of August, preaching at Richard's church. And they got to talking, went and played golf, and Richard hired him the next day. And the crazy thing is, Danny had scheduled to speak with Richard on Friday, and the church he was working for, Ed Young Fellowship Baptist, big church in Dallas, let him go on Thursday. So he actually got double pay for a couple of weeks. Worked out nice. But we were talking about this right here, about when you go from sweetness to sorrow to bitterness. And I think about our time in Tennessee before we came here. We had gone from sweetness to bitterness. I mean, it was, for us, for that time in our life, it was Mara. It was bitter. It was sorrow a lot of the time. God had never moved. The Redeemer was right there. He was always there. And it doesn't matter about social position. He's rich in all of those things. And I thank God. I thank God for the Redeemer. Lord, I am thankful. Man, I'm so thankful. I'm sorry, Lord, for doing such a bad job of presenting this tonight. Lord, I thank you for the Redeemer. It blows my mind that you would want us back. So much so that you would give your life, give your glory, lay your glory down and take up the cross of sin. I thank you that you give us power, you give us love, you give us right thinking. Lord, you give us wisdom. You said if any man lack wisdom, let him ask. And so you give that to us. Lord, I'm glad for the Redeemer. Now, Lord, I pray that you would give us a good night, give us a good rest of the week. Be with us Sunday morning as we come back here. Lord, that your name would be honored and glorified. In Jesus' name, amen.